Essentialism is the solution to a problem that a lot of people, otherwise successful, sometimes overachieving people often feel, which is that they feel stretched too thin at work or at home. They feel busy, but not necessarily productive.
I think often the narrative is their demands are pulling me away from things I deem essential. You're saying, but what if they're what's essential?
It's clear to anyone who hears the story now, and of course clear to me, that I made a fool's bargain. So what I learned was if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will.
Decision-making happens more readily. And decision-making really is central to essentialism. In fact, you could argue the practice of saying no is central to essentialism. This is episode 145 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. And today I have a guest with me. I am interviewing Greg McKeown, the author of Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. And I'm so delighted to have Greg on the podcast because a number of years ago when his book Essentialism first came out, it was one of the books that I found when I was researching this idea that everything is a choice. You know, I had this hypothesis that Brilliant Balance was going to be built on that principle, built on shifting a perspective from, what choice do I have? It is what it is. This is how things have to be, to the belief that everything is in fact a choice. And that if we exercise the power of choice and can stand the discomfort that sometimes comes with making those choices, that life can in fact be so much better. And I crossed paths with his work, and it was a sort of a resounding alignment with this hypothesis that I had been trying to explore. So for many years now, I have recommended Greg's book to my clients and friends and colleagues, and it is an absolute delight to introduce you to Greg today. A little bit of backdrop. Greg is originally from London, England. He studied in the US, has an MBA from Stanford, and he wrote this book, Essentialism, because it was a lesson that he had been wrestling with and trying to unpack for a number of years. He has been teaching this philosophy of essentialism ever since, and really teaching it around the world to companies and organizations. He is a very accomplished public speaker, a very trusted advisor to a number of big companies like Adobe and Apple and Google and Facebook, right? Companies you certainly will recognize. He has spoken on stages including South by Southwest and the annual conference of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. In fact, he was named a young global leader by the World Economic Forum in 2012. His writing has been covered broadly by the media, everything from Fast Company to Fortune to Harvard Business Review to NBC. And I think maybe most importantly, he is a father and a husband. He has 4 children, and he and his family live in the Los Angeles area where he does his work. Very happily, Greg has recently launched a podcast called Essentialism, and I hope you'll check it out. He also has a second book in the works. We'll link up all those things for you in today's show notes. So he and I had a terrific conversation. I think you're going to love it, especially when we start to talk about how we can teach this philosophy to our children and some evidence that they may be more ready for this than we think. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Greg McKeown. So Greg, thank you so much again for being with us.
It's such a pleasure to be with you.
So I want to dig right into a little bit of the backstory on the whole idea of essentialism. Tell me in your words, what is the definition of essentialism?
Essentialism is the solution to a problem that a lot of people, otherwise successful, sometimes overachieving people often feel, which is that they feel stretched too thin at work or at home. They feel busy, but not necessarily productive. They feel like their day becomes just constantly hijacked by other people's agenda for them. And so they fall into this undisciplined pursuit of more, going in many different directions, but only making a little bit of progress. And so essentialism is an antidote to that. How can you figure out what really matters, the vital few, as opposed to the trivial many? How can you eliminate the trivial many, or at least reduce your investment there, and instead build a system that really works for you instead of against you, and making it easier for you to do what really matters? That's essentialism.
I love it. And it's, I always think of it as having room and space around the things you love most, so you can truly see them and appreciate them, and have a little bit of buffer zone around each of the things that matters the most.
I love it. I love the way you just described it.
So you wrote this book how many years ago?
The book came out 6 years ago.
And you were writing it a couple of years before that, a year before that?
Yeah, I've been working on it in various ways for years and years before that. But 9 months of really focused time. I was in monk mode, doing it for the 9 months before it came out.
And why was this the idea that you felt compelled to get out into the world? What was the reason behind the book and the calling to bring it into the world?
Well, there were two things. One was I was working with Silicon Valley companies and noticed a predictable pattern there where, you'd have these companies focused in the early days on just a few things. It would lead to success. That generated options. And all of that sounds like the right problem to have, but it did in fact turn out to be a problem because they would fall into the pattern we just described, this undisciplined pursuit of more. So they would start to plateau in their progress or fail altogether. And so it was this oddity that success could become a catalyst for failure that was really grabbing my attention on the professional front and at the organizational level. But then I had a personal experience which was defining in hindsight. I got an email from a colleague at the time, said Friday between 1 and 2 p.m. would be a very bad time for your wife to have a baby. She was expecting, otherwise that's an even stranger email to receive, I suppose.
Right.
And so there we go. We Thursday night, Anna goes into labor. I go into, we're all in the hospital, and I feel torn. Instead of being able to focus on what really matters and enjoy what really matters and be present for that, I'm feeling, how can I keep everybody happy? How can I do a bit of everything? And so the next day, the daughter as well, everyone's as well as one can be after having gone through the valley of the shadow of death the night before. But I'm still feeling torn. And so to my shame, I go to the meeting and, I remember my colleague said, look, the client will respect you for the choice you just made to be here. I'm not sure that was true. I don't know that the look on their faces evinced that sort of confidence.
It's respect, right.
But it's clear to anyone who hears the story now, and of course clear to me, that I made a fool's bargain. So what I learned was, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And that really is a mantra of sorts for what has now become the book Essentialism, and and this ongoing mission that I feel to be able to encourage and inspire and empower people everywhere to prioritize deliberately, intentionally, and so even I've just shared that story, but I put out to the Essentialist community as we are launching this Essentialism podcast. Who do you want the first interview to be? And people can go back and listen to it now. But this is my wife's side of that story. You hear the other side of it. And,
yes.
and it was a little vulnerable for me to have to do that, and perhaps for her too, but it's an interesting conversation.
Well, and I think our listeners will appreciate that it's not always clear cut, because there are moments of clarity that in retrospect you see you likely would have made a different choice, leaving an hours-old daughter to go to a meeting that you maybe can't remember who it was even with. And yet in that moment, the desire to think like, I can keep everyone happy if I just do this. And that's the dance so many of us are doing, right? It's, to your point, a fool's bargain, but that dance of, if I can just stretch a little farther, if I can just give a little less to all of these pieces, maybe I can serve them all just enough. And I think that's been the dominant narrative. That's been the, when my generation was raised being told we could have it all. I don't think we realized how little of each thing we were really going to have, right? In that model.
Yes.
And you have children, 4.
That's right.
Okay. So how do children make essentialism harder?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I thought you were going to say, how do they apply it to whatever? How do they make it harder? I mean, I'm not sure that they do or that they have to make it harder. But that deserves some explanation. First of all, let me just describe sort of 3 concentric circles. Okay, actually, I'll draw them. Okay, here we go. We got 3 circles. You can probably imagine them without me drawing them, but still, I'm going to do this. So here we go. We got 3 circles. Can you see that?
I do.
Okay, here's what people normally do. Is that they have in the outer circle other. Right. This is the other stuff. It's all sorts of projects. It's people out there. It's everything else. It's the inbox. It's the noise that we're watching on television. It's the news inputs. It's all the inputs. It's everything. It's all that stuff. After that, people move to family. Right. This is the idea: is that you're moving inwards. So the problem with that is that what's left after you've done everything else is not very much. And so what's left for my wife or for my children, what's left for family can be really thin if I've done it in this order. And then in the final circle, in the center circle, I don't have to write it all, but protect the asset. I am going to write it all here. Protect the asset. That's at the center. And here's what I've learned is that non-essentialists do it the way we just described. And essentialists, all they do, it's the simplest idea in the world. They just change the order. That's it. They just begin with protecting the asset. Then they work on investing in family. And then they work on their other more carefully curated, selected priority projects. And if you can get the order right, I don't find in my own life, oh my goodness, children make it so much harder to be an essentialist. What I think is, this is who's essential. They become essential. This is what I want to do. This is what I think my longest contribution to the world will be through them. And so I feel like that's one answer to your question, even though I do think there are challenges associated with family and all the different work. I think that's one important insight.
So I love that flip that, I think often the narrative is their demands are pulling me away from things I deem essential. You're saying, but what if they're what's essential? In your definition, at the center was the asset. Define the asset.
The asset's you, right? It's particularly your spiritual, then emotional, physical, mental capacity. If I had to say the highest, most important part of that asset, it's your ability to discern what matters. And so, so specifically, like if people want to do one thing to become more of an essentialist, today, it's take a nap.
Yes.
Because if you can take even a 15-minute nap end to end, it will just restore all of the executive function of your brain. It helps you to be able to say, oh, this stuff that I was bothered about before doesn't even matter. Here I was getting all wound up by some issue or by something on social media, and you're in that rabbit hole and you're going down into it all. And it's because you're too tired. It's because you're decision fatigue for the day. It's because you're at exhaustion level. And so you're getting pulled into this stuff. By protecting the asset, by taking that nap, for example, it doesn't have to be a nap, there's many other things, but it's not a bad place to start. You show up better to your family. You show up, therefore, better when in selecting what relatively few projects you want to pursue professionally or to build your business and so on. You're able to select all of those better. So that, to me, is what I mean by asset. Yeah.
And the language foundational balance practices will be familiar to our audience. So it's exactly what you're saying, sleep and breathing and movement and eating well. Or, when we are feeling strong and clear-minded, then decision-making happens more readily. And decision-making really is central to essentialism. In fact, you could argue the practice of saying no is central to essentialism. So I love this. I've heard you talk about the false dichotomy of the polite yes and the rude no. Can you talk a little bit about what does centrist positioning look like there?
Yeah, right. So I've discovered this after writing Essentialism, is post that there does seem to be this two extreme ways of thinking. You just have two options, only a polite yes or a rude no. Of course, there is a third alternative. It is to negotiate. And so if you only think there's two options, the chances are you're going to do a lot more polite yeses, and you'll only get to rude no's because you're burned out, worn out, exhausted. And finally, everything from everybody is an interruption and an irritation, right? So eventually you finally just kind of lose it with the kids, with yourself, with other people, because everything's too much. The alternative is to discover this middle space and the gracious negotiation. It's stepping into the negotiation with courage, equal parts courage and compassion, to have these conversations that you might otherwise put off. I'm staring at it right now, actually, on my desk here, this little note that is a decent example of this in practice. Well, I think it's a terrific example. It's from my daughter, Eve. I was trying to persuade her to read this book. I don't remember which one. But she had lots of other things that she was trying to do that day. So she was pushing back, not especially rudely, or there was no big argument, but she slips this note under my door while I was having a meeting in the office. It is what she wrote. I thought this is just illustrates so much of this. She says, I already expressed my unwillingness to read this book, but I'm willing to make a counteroffer. I am not willing to read it all in one day today, but I'd be happy to explore the possibility of reading it in the future over the course of a few weeks. I believe it would be best to wait till the end of my literature assignment. If you would like me to read this book in place of a separate assignment and over the course of a few weeks, I'm sure that can be made possible.
Oh, she's delightful. She's delightful. How old is your daughter?
Well, she was 14 when she wrote that note. Mm-hmm. And the fact that she knew that she had the language to be able to step into that third alternative, the fact that there was enough understanding of essentialism to know that you can't do it all. The reason that you can't say a polite yes to everything is not because you're not polite, it's because you cannot do everything. Non-essentialism wants to pretend that's not true. We were sold that idea, but really you can do anything but not everything. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we need this skill set to be able to negotiate.
This is so important to me because I have 3 children, 2 daughters and a son. And that is something that one of my children would do. They would, we get PowerPoint presentations on why we should get a guinea pig and those kind of things. And they're very compelling. It is, there's a willingness to engage that I think when we're teaching them how to make choices, do you want to be in choir? Do you want to join that club? Not just, well, everyone's doing it. Of course you have to do it because don't you want to get into a good college, which seems to be the only narrative.
Right. The race to nowhere.
Right. And the choices around what I really want to model and what I learned from your book and other sources is, teaching them that choice-making model is infinitely more valuable over time in shaping the direction of their lives than teaching them how to cram more and more in and stay up late studying and not sleep and get into the same vicious cycle that everyone else is trying to get out of. And yet, Greg, it carries with it that tension of it may be atypical for a parent to say, well, here's my child essentially pushing back, right? They're not doing what I told them to do. They're standing up for themselves and saying no to that. And I think for some parents, that's a big adjustment to learn that your children are building a skill by negotiating with you that is not necessarily disrespectful and one that they will carry forward into life, right? But do you find that it's sometimes like jarring for a parent who maybe wasn't raised that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's such a focus on controlling our children to be the way we think they should be, which I think this whole helicopter parenting kind of grows out of that same assumption, which is, look, I've got to make sure you are a success according to criteria I had before you were thinking about anything like this. You got to be so careful that you don't effectively snuff out the very thing that will lead a child through their whole life. So this idea of trying to help a child to discern what matters and what doesn't, I think is basically the primary role of being a father, being a parent. Once that job is done, the primary work of being a parent is also done. Now I can move into a completely different role. I'm just there to support, to help them to fulfill their essential mission in life.
Yes.
And so very early on with our children, we were having these kinds of conversations. So certainly now, even my eldest is 17, youngest is 11. Certainly by the time our eldest was 10, she was having materially important strategic insights into who she was and what she wanted to do and not do with her life. There's another note. It's not this one I read, of course, but and I don't have it here at hand, but she'd been staying up late trying to connect the dots between what's my 100-year vision for my life. I mean, this was literally what we'd been talking about. So she's thinking about it. And so she has this discovery that ever since she was 5, she wanted to be a director, and she didn't have language for that till she was 10, but that's what she shared. So in the years since, she was able to graduate high school a couple of years early and go to community college, and she's been doing media classes there, doing video work, pursuing the dream. She's done internships. I didn't do internships till certainly till college, and even then, the opportunity to help someone discover who they are young and who they aren't young, and then be able to invest on it. But this is to me, it's an exciting proposition.
It is. And not just to discern, but also to courageously protect. Courageously protect through that note. That's saying, I have choices about how I want to spend this time, and I hear you on your input, but here's how it sequences in. And that's the same skill we would want an executive to have in a boardroom. These are skills that we're building that they'll have for life if they can courageously defend essentially their position.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I just think that you're correct in having identified that essentialism is a decision-making framework. I mean, that's what it really is at it's really its highest point, because then you can apply it not just to time management issues, but you can apply it to all of the decisions that come your way to make sure that you are trying. It's not like one more thing you do. It's a different lens through which you can design a life that will look very different than the person next to you. Your life as an essentialist will look very different to my life as an essentialist, and it ought to. It's just that we use the same process and lens to select what we want to go after.
I love it because it's a path to purpose. Essentially, I keep saying essentially by accident, but it's a path to purpose. And I think that's where the overlap is within the work we're doing with so many women. One of the patterns I see in our community is we have a lot of what I lovingly call recovering perfectionists in our community who at a gut level understand that the way they've been living as a perfectionist is not serving them and are looking for a different way, but shedding of some of those behaviors is painful. And I often describe it, I would put myself in that camp, by the way, and I often describe it as perfectionists, I think, have two patterns. There's doing too much, like I'm going to be the one who figures out how to do all the things without trade-offs, or doing things too well, like overdoing, over-engineering, over-perfecting whatever collection we do. Yes. Talk to me about how those patterns are the enemy of essentialism, and how can we make that shift?
First of all, let me just give a warning, which is when somebody comes to essentialism and they still are holding on to their perfectionist lens, they can sometimes try to be an essentialist in a very non-essentialist way. They can say, well, I'm just going to be perfectly essentialist at everything, which really sort of doubles down on the problem.
Does not work, right?
Yeah, so we have to remove we have to remove a set of lenses we might not realize that we've been carrying fully. And some of that can take some work. I don't know how hard it is, but I think it takes, some consistency and persistence to say, well, what is driving this? What's driving me to think I have to prove myself on every single thing, that I have to win at everything that anyone else is doing? So if I see it on Instagram, I've got to do that too. If they've got more followers than me, then I feel bad about myself. And so on, ad infinitum. We have to do a little bit of work to get back to why am I even in this competition? Why am I into this deep comparison? And try to, to go through and shedding those things in service of the essential mission that you came here to fulfill. I just have a deep belief in this, that each of us has a unique and essential mission in life. And I was just talking to an entrepreneur. She's a woman. She's a musician. She's written 2,000 songs or something in her life. Really extraordinary. It's religious music, and she's just this consistency that she's produced all of this. Well, I was just talking to her. I was very touched about this experience because she's towards the end of her life now. She just had a stroke, and so she really sort of knows it's the end or soon. And she gave me an insight that I'd never really had before, which wasn't just live with purpose, fulfill a mission, you have a mission to. That's sort of that's almost the young person's version of that subject. She's asking the question, how can I leave nothing undone on my mission? How do I make sure that I get it completed and don't leave anything incomplete? And that's a different way of thinking about mission. It's not just, hey, live with mission, live with purpose, fill your life with purpose. It's which things do you need to complete to be done? And when you think about it in those terms, I think it can be very empowering to say, of course I can't compete with everybody else. Of course I can't try to outdo them in their mission. Let them do their thing. Be happy for their successes. Be happy for their different journey. Take joy in, I'm just going to try and fulfill this special, meaningful mission. And I certainly am inspired by that myself now. Let's figure out what needs to be completed within the precious and limited time I have.
That's beautiful. And the word it calls to mind for me is enough. I've been dancing with this idea of enough lately. And what is enough? And enough is that you get to define what is complete for your mission. So I love the connection there from the other side. It reminds me of the point where I started counting down the years until my children will likely leave home, instead of, you're standing at the starting line looking at what feels like infinity. And then there's this fulcrum where you notice like, oh wait, this has a countdown timer and it started. And your juxtaposition with her story reminds me of that. It's sort of looking from the other side.
Yeah, I use one of these apps that you can do, like a countdown app. And I've used those for a few different things that I found interesting in my life, right? Where you say, okay, I want to complete the next book by this date. And so it shows you how many months, weeks, days you have remaining. And it's a good way of trying to think about time, or at least it can be. And I put on there, my sort of estimated demise date, what I think optimistically, how much time I think I have. And it's not at all, it's not the least bit negative or downer for me. To me, every time I go on there, of course, there's less time than last time I looked. And it just is this constant reminder, don't pick up things that aren't your mission. There's always enough time to fulfill what's most essential. There's always enough time to do the 90% or above vitally important work.
Yes.
There's not enough time to do the 60% and the 40% and the 20% and all the 10% nonsense. If you feel like there's not enough time, it's because, and I feel this strain of not being enough time. As soon as I get out of alignment and start picking up other people's achievements and saying, well, I have to do that because they've done it, and what a brilliant strategy this person's following, and you start doing that, and of course you don't have enough time. But when I get back to what is it really you are supposed to do? What did you come here to do? Then I feel time seems to elongate, stretch out, and more still.
Yes. So I want to talk practically about the application of that, you know, as you're an expert in essentialism and you literally wrote the book on it, right? You are a working parent. How do you put some structure into your day or your week, however you think about it, so that you are making sure there's enough time?
I mean, there's a few things that I've learned. One is a fairly recent thing, which is I'd heard of a disciplined trainer. He trains the fittest people in the world in these CrossFit national championships and
a little scared
championships. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. Yeah, well, what he does, no, but it's good. It's like 10 to 5, whatever meeting he's in, he just starts packing up. He doesn't explain himself. He just starts packing up and he's just doing it. And by the time he gets to the door, so he keeps on talking. And by the time he gets to the door, it's a couple of minutes before 5. And he'll say, okay, well, we'll talk later. That's fine. And he will leave. He simply leaves. And ever since I've heard that, I just realized, well, this is what you're going to do. And so my practice around this is that I will walk out of my office and I will announce what time it is. And so I literally yell it out to the whole family. So generally my goal is like 4:59 that I'm out there. On a bad day, it will go maybe as late as 5:23 might be the latest I've been without realizing it on that day. You know, just busy doing things and don't notice it. That's a practice that has been very empowering for me because first of all, you realize it can be done. It doesn't have to be this idea of flexibility. Yes, great, be flexible. There's lots of benefits to flexibility, but there's downsides to flexibility too. And if you're not careful, it's 6 o'clock, it's 6:30, it's 7 o'clock, it's 7:30, and it never stops. And then it's back to what we talked about with those priority circle, which is that what is left of you by the time you get out, other people are a bit more frazzled, and so they get the least healthy part of you. And so now the relationship's going to be strained and the cycle then continues. So that's one concrete thing that helps me to prioritize not just the family after 5, but also the work I'm going to do, because I can't simply say, well, I'll work later. You've got to actually make some trade-offs.
Yes.
So decide what matters today and how you'll know when you're done.
So that's fascinating, Greg. I love the hard stop idea, but I love announcing the time, right? Because there's this public accountability to, totally. I called my shot. I'm going to, totally. Whether I'm over or under. And I think people start to respect, like when we're ending this, even if you did it in a meeting, we're ending this daily meeting at this time, no matter what, there's a healthy respect for that people start to then steer toward the end of the meeting because we know, right? So I love that practice at the end of the day. I suspect there will be people who adopt that immediately after hearing the suggestion. So in order to keep us on time, I'm going to move us to the speed round. And then I want to make sure that the people listening know how to find you, and we'll link up all those things in the show notes. So let's do the speed round. This is 5 short questions. First one is, what makes you feel brilliant?
When I have deep, quiet, focused writing, in this case, on my next book.
Excellent.
That's answer. Good.
Excellent. What's your favorite time-saving or productivity hack?
One that comes to mind is just eliminating everything off my phone, everything, and then selecting back one by one those things that really are actually helping me to, fulfill the mission I'm trying to pursue.
What have you learned to say no to? Just one thing.
Just one thing. I'll give you an example from today. I get requests to do coaching, and I do none. 0. For a variety of reasons, but that's one concrete thing that today I said no to again, and have said no to for many years. even though it's a perfectly good thing. And it might even reach 85% on a scale of 1 to 100. It's a really good thing to do. And I could see it making a difference, but the answer's no.
What's one dream you're chasing right now?
I would like to build a community of essentialists. That's what the podcast's about. That's what the next book is about. That's probably what the book after that will be about. We'll be trying to build, create a community of people that can help each other globally. Right now, people have the book, but they need the rest. And I think that there's an important role to play for people to really support each other in this journey to become essentialists.
So what's the song you turn on when you need to get in the zone?
I love listening to the same song many, many times if I love it and it gets me in the zone. One that I've been listening to is from Kanye West's latest album, and the song is God Is. And I just listen to that so many times over and over when I'm trying to get into the zone, and that's an example of that.
Perfect. Greg, where is the best place for our listeners to find you and your work online? We'll obviously link to the book.
Essentialism.com is a place that has, people can sign up for a newsletter, they can sign up for the podcast there, but also there's going to be an online class coming, and then some other stuff, really interesting stuff that we're going to do there. So it's going to be an ongoing, evolving community that's built that website. So
I love it. And I think it warrants it, because I will tell you, you have the seeds of a community, I know, within ours, with women who have been so affected by your work and really presented with a completely alternative framework to what they were taught that's changing lives. So I'm grateful for your work. It's meant a lot to me. It's been a privilege to share it with our community. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. The privilege is mine. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I enjoyed conducting it. It was so fun to have a conversation with Greg. I think it's always amazing when you get to have a two-way dialogue with someone whose work you've admired and really learned so much from. It's fun to turn the tables and get to ask some questions. And I hope you really got a lot out of this interview. If you are new to Greg's work, we've linked all of his resources in the show notes for you. And if you are new to my work, welcome to the Brilliant Balance podcast. I hope that you'll subscribe and stay with us for future episodes. You can do that on any podcast service where you're listening. And if you're new to the community, come join us in the Brilliant Balance Facebook group, which is really a fantastic community of professional women who are trying to balance the demands of work and the rest of our lives in a way that makes us feel brilliant. You can find that by just going to Facebook, searching groups for Brilliant Balance, and we will welcome you in. Thanks for joining today. Till next time, let's be brilliant.